Vai, vai, ci vediamo.
Ve lo rubo un minuto.
Sì, 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 vai, vai. Mate.
So yeah,
Thank you guys for the organization, as always.
I
Dziękuję.
don't know what I would do without them. So yeah, what happened?
Yeah, let's go. Let's take a coffee.
Oh, I'm gonna do my Wagner thing, but
Good afternoon. I want to thank everybody who joins us in Ukraine Media Center Inform. My name is Ola Tamanova, and we continue our operation today. It's day 426 of the full-scale invasion of our homeland by Russian aggressor, and now we will be talking about the confessions of the Wagnerites, what will be the actions of the Ukrainian justice system. Joining us online is Fedir Venislavskyi, People's Deputy and member of the Parliamentary Committee on National Security, Defense and Intelligence, and the representative of the President of Ukraine in Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine. Good afternoon, Mr. Fedir. Good afternoon. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to the heroes. Well, Mr. Fedir, we know that the Wagnerites confessed of the war crimes committed in Ukraine. So what is the phase the case is moving? Well, we cannot talk about any phase that is related to the confessions of this transnational military company, as it was the illegal military company, as it was recognized by the United States, because that confession was in the Russian Human Rights Organization. According to the organization that is available in the mass media, that Wagnerites was detained by the investigation committee of Russian Federation, and he was forwarded to the law enforcement agencies of the aggressor country to provide some evidences and public confessions. But in a view of the practice existing in Russian Federation that has nothing to do with justice, usually it's difficult to expect that those horrific confessions of murders, including murders of children, will be documented within the legal framework which normal law enforcement agencies should be guided by. Unfortunately, I don't have such optimism. The question is whether it could be documented in under a normal procedure, so it can become an evidence in further criminal cases. So now we can only talk about some political confession that may become another argument in future to have Russia and their top-level government and military government officials and military commanders brought to liability in courts of Ukraine and international courts. Ukrainian judicial system will continue their activities with documenting the confessions within the framework of all the investigation actions that are in line with the legislation of Ukraine. It's impossible to interrogate those persons in Russia and to say about some sensational results of their confessions that will entail any legal consequences. Well, I cannot say anything about that for the time being. Mr. Fedir, we were talking with our human rights organizations here in Ukraine, and they agree that this case should be investigated by our judicial system, that Ukrainian justice should come up with the award in this case. We don't have to engage the international community. Do you support this opinion? Well, just like I said, even based on their public confession that we were able to see in the mass media, the bodies of the pre-court investigation should start the investigative activities in this regard. So this confession is the basis, is the reason to initiate a criminal case. But what I mean that we cannot interrogate those persons physically about those facts that they confessed of publicly, because we don't have access to those persons and we don't have them physically in Ukraine. If such criminals end up in the hands of our law enforcement, so obviously we will be able to document everything and put everything into the procedural plane, but now we can only rely on the circumstances that we have documented in Ukraine and which are confirmed by the evidences of the witnesses. We add them all to the cases. So for us, it doesn't make a lot of difference what will the law enforcement agencies do in Russian Federation and what the international community does. We continue following our track, and there will be a parallel track according to which those cases will be considered in international courts. So do you think that we should have the International Criminal Court involved in bringing those Wagnerites to liability? Well, the crimes committed by occupational troops of the Russian Federation and those mercenaries from Wagner, like the one that we're talking about in this situation, they are being investigated according to the Criminal Code of Ukraine as the crimes committed against the citizens of Ukraine, and that's sufficient for us to bring such persons potentially to liability by extra court conviction. This is how our courts can approve those convictions. So those crimes are the crimes against humanity, crimes, the war crimes, which should be in fact considered by the international court. So those are the two parallel processes. We do what we can do in this situation of the martial law within the legal framework that we're moving on, and the international organizations, they do their thing. For us, it's important to have the maximum number of international experts to be engaged in those processes so that they are enabled within this framework of international support to help the International Criminal Court and Ukrainian judicial system to bring those guilty ones to liability. Well, we continue working on establishing the International Tribunal. Do you have any news on that front? Well, yeah, the work is underway, but in view of the fact that Russia is currently presiding the United Nations Security Council and they have a voice in General Assembly of United Nations, there is little hope on approval of the resolution on creation of the International Criminal Tribunal, but our representative in the United Nations, the Office of the President, and our ambassador to the United Nations, they all support the idea of creating this tribunal, and I think that there is a hope that support grows on the level of the General Assembly. And do we have any questions on the floor? Thank you. I have a question about the improvement of mobilization measures that you were mentioning before. Upon a number of meetings and after the negotiation with the military authorities, there are already certain projects being developed. As soon as they are finalized, we will communicate all this information to the journalist community. Maybe you can comment on this issue. The military complained for low remuneration figures during their medical treatment, how this problem can be solved, and are you aware of this issue? Yes, there is certain disproportion in payment when the military who were injured during battles, they're not being paid enough that would enable the further military service and medical treatment, and we keep working on those issues with the Deputy Minister of Defense, and I hope that shortly this issue will be solved. We're having another question in the studio.
In Chris Sampson, Netsec Media. Two questions. Are there current Wagner members that have been captured and therefore are facing legal action? And number two, are there any changes in the status for less than, probably best ideal description would be conscripted prisoners? Will they be treated different than, for instance, for hire mercenaries who were clearly joining to make money?
I don't have a full information. I cannot give you the extensive picture, but according to what I know, there are some members of Wagner who are being captured by the Ukrainian armed forces, and they have the status of the prisoners of war. Whether there will be any specific treatment to them based on the international conventions, they are the combatants, they are the representatives of the occupational authority who are in war with our armed forces. So Ukraine recognizes all the international documents, and the captured Wagnerites are the captured combatants who will get the same treatment as other Russian military captured by Ukrainian armed forces. Thank you, Mr. Fedir. Dear colleagues, I'm reminding you joining us was Fedir Venislavskyi, the People's Deputy of Ukraine, and our next briefing will be at 14:30, and we will be talking about the liberated Chernobyl nuclear power plant and the temporarily occupied Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Joining us will be Oleg Korikov, the Chief State Inspector for Nuclear and Radiation Safety of Ukraine. So bear with us, trust in our armed forces, and glory to Ukraine.